So you want to start out by finding, thank you so much, finding the value of these three numbers. Hi, thank you so much. Finding the value of these three numbers. So the 5 plus 1, 6 divided by 3, 8 minus 5, and 3 plus 3. Go ahead and figure out what those four numbers are. So it is 5 plus 1. 6. What's 6 divided by 3? 2. What's 8 minus 5? 8 minus 5 is how many? 3. That equals 3 plus 3, which is 6. And then x. And we got to solve this for x. Now, what I'm noticing, though, is what number do you see on both sides of the equation, though? 6, yeah. So we can divide both sides by 6. And we're left with 2 times 3 equals x. And what is 2 times 3? 2 times 3 would be, what would it be? I can't hear nobody. 6. So the answer would be D. All right, let's go to page 10 in your notes. So let's go to page 10. And we're going to find the inverse. And then we're going to graph the last three. So let's go to page 10 in our notes. So first thing first, f of x is the same as y. So y equals 3x plus 2. So when you see a f of x, that's function notation, and that represents y. So step number 1, when you find the inverse, is to switch these two variables. You're going to swap them. So instead of y equals 3x plus 2, you're going to write x equals 3y plus 2. And now we're ready to solve it for y. So we have to do the opposite of each one of these operations. And what's the opposite of adding 2? If I ask you what's the opposite of adding 2, what would you say? Subtract 2. Good. So we're going to start by subtracting the 2. So then that'll give me x minus 2 equals 3y. And then this y is being multiplied by 3. What's the opposite of multiplying by 3? The opposite of multiplication would be what? Division, yeah. So let me zoom in. We're going to divide every single one of these terms by 3. There is an invisible 1 right here. So this is our inverse. That's our inverse. That's what we get after we solve. So inverse notation is where you put your f in this little minus 1. It looks like an exponent of x. That's the symbol for inverse. And our inverse would be 1/3 x minus 2/3. That is your inverse. If we were to graph, and we don't have to graph this example, but if we were to graph these two, Their inverses, they would reflect across y equals x. Who remembers how to graph a line? Y equals mx plus b. Anybody remember that? Nobody? One person? All right, let's review how to do that. So let's start off by graphing this first one here. So first of all, let me do a little mini y equals mx plus b lesson. Y equals mx plus b. M is your slope. B is the y-intercept. Those are the two things we need to know in order to graph a straight line. We need to know where to start it on the y-axis, and we need to know the slope. How many hops up, how many hops down, and we always go to the right. So in this equation that we're starting off with, B, I'm going to graph the original in red. So we have y equals negative 2x plus 8. Your slope is negative 2 over 1. Your y-intercept is 8. Whenever your slope is a whole number, we just put it over 1. So what this is telling me is to start by putting a point right here. Everybody look at the screen. We're going to start it at 8. So starting our graph at 8. Now my slope is negative. Whenever it's negative, we go down and to the right. Down and to the right. If it's positive, we move up and to the right. So I'm going to hop. From this point, hop down 1, 2, to the right 1, put a point. Repeat. 1, 2, to the right, put a point. Repeat. 1, 2, to the right, put a point. All right, now if you have something straight, go ahead and connect that, draw your line. And then we're going to label that f of x. So especially if you're not using two different colors, label each line as the original and the inverse. All right. So now we're going to find the inverse. Now, when we find the inverse, remember, we start by swapping x and y. So these two, we're going to reverse them. So that would be x equals negative 2y plus 8. And we're going to solve this for y. When you solve, you're undoing. So you're going to undo the operations that are happening to y. So we see how here there's a plus 8. What's the opposite of adding 8? The opposite of addition is what? Subtraction. So we're going to subtract the 8 from both sides. So that would be x minus 8 equals negative 2y. And then we're going to divide every single number by negative 2. So this is your slope. So this number in front of x is our slope. So you see how that's 1 over negative 2? That's our slope. You can put the negative in front. You don't have to put it in your denominator. X. And then what do you get when you divide negative 8 by negative 2? Two negatives divide to give you what? A positive. So what is negative 8 divided by negative 2? Positive what? 4. Good. So now we're going to graph this one. So you have your your slope is -1/2. Your y-intercept is +4. So let's go ahead and graph it. You're going to start this graph at 4. Because it's negative, we're going to go down and to the right. So hop down 1 to the right, 2. Down 1 to the right, 2. Down 1 to the right, 2. And draw your line. And then I'm going to label that with the f -1 of x to show that that is my inverse. In homework 2, numbers 3 and 4, you have to find the inverse and graph it. Homework 2 is due on Wednesday. Now, whenever you have two graphs that are inverses, they always reflect over the line y equals x. That is the line it's going to reflect across. Thumbs up, sideways, down. Where we at? What y'all thinking so far? Okay, let's do a couple more. Let's go to the next one. Let's start by graphing the original. So this original is y equals 2x minus 6. Is y equals x, Andre. Y equals x. So your slope is the number in front of x, which is 2/1. And the y-intercept is at -6. Go ahead and graph that. So start off by putting a point at -6 on the y-axis. And then because your slope is positive, we're going to go up to, that's how you graph it, up to right 1. If it's negative, we go down and right. If it's positive, we move up and right. Always go to the right. So from that point that you plotted, hop up to 1, 2, to the right 1, put a point. Repeat. Up 2 to the right 1, put a point. Up 2 to the right 1, put a point. And let's go ahead and graph that. And we're going to call that f of x because that's our original. Okay, so now let's find our inverse. So we're going to start by reversing these x and y. So we're going to write x equals 2y minus 6. And let's solve that for y. So we're doing the opposite of what you see happening to the y. So this y, right now, you have 6 being subtracted and it's being multiplied by 2. So we're going to do the opposite. Instead of subtracting 6, we're going to add 6. And instead of multiplying by 2, we're going to divide 2. It's always just 2 operations to find your inverse. So we're going to add the 6. So that gives me x plus 6 equals 2y. And then we're dividing every single number by 2. So your inverse, f -1 of x, is going to equal, and then you have 1/2. See how you have a positive 1 over 2x. And then what is 6 divided by 2? Half of 6 is what? 3. So for the second line, I'm going to write it over here. We have our y-intercept at 3. and our slope is 1 over 2. So we're going to go up 1 and then move right 2. That's how we're going to graph our second line. So starting it at positive 3, go up 1 to the right 2. 1, 2, put a point. Hop up 1 to the right 2, put a point. Up 1 to the right 2, put a point. All right, and now we're going to connect that, and that would be my inverse, and then label it with the inverse. So I'm going to label it f negative 1 of x. And what's the answer at the bottom? Since the graphs are inverses, what line do they reflect over? What did we write for the last example? What line does it reflect over? Y equals x. All right, we got one more and then we are done. And you can use this time to work on homework too. Okay, so now we're going to graph this one. So y equals 1/3 x minus 1. So your slope is 1/3. Your y-intercept is negative 1. So this means we're going up 1, right 3. So let's put a point at negative 1. And then from that point, go up 1 to the right 3, put a point. Up 1 to the right 3, put a point. Up 1 to the right 3 and put a point. And then you draw your line. And label it with f of x because that is your original. All right, so now we're going to find our inverse. So to find our inverse, we switch our x and y. So switch x and y. So that would be x equals 1/3 y minus 1. And we'll talk about how to deal with a fraction. So we're going to start by doing the opposite of subtracting 1. So we all see how there's a minus 1 right here. We have to do the opposite, and the opposite of subtracting 1 is adding 1. So that's going to give us x plus 1 equals 1/3 y. And now, to clear out your fraction, we're going to multiply by your denominator. So we see how we have a fraction here. What's the number at the bottom of my fraction? 3. So let's multiply this entire fraction by 3. So we're going to do 3 times x, 3 times 1, and 3 times 1/3. If you're not sure, go ahead with your calculator, multiply 3 times 1/3. What do you think you get when you multiply 3 times 1/3? 1, yeah. And remember, in order to solve for y, we needed to have a 1. So my inverse would be 3x plus 3 equals y. And we're going to put that in inverse notation. So your slope is 3 over 1, and your y-intercept is 3. So let's go ahead and graph this line, put a point at 3. And then from that point, move up 3 to the right 1, up 3 to the right 1. So I'm going to put a point at 3. Then I'm going to move up 3, 1, 2, 3 to the right 1. Move up 3, 1, 2, 3 to the right 1. And then draw our line. And label that with the inverse. And remember, anytime the graphs are inverses, and you see how we're asked to answer this question over and over again, that means it's probably going to be on the test because it's at every question. But graphs that are inverses reflect across the line what? Y equals X. So everyone take out homework 2. That was passed out on Friday. If you were absent Friday, get it out the absent hanging file. Homework 2 is due on Wednesday.